Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, has made his life mission to wage war against corruption and evil, no matter what the cost. Now imagine if he was dropped into the Boys universe. No Justice Department oversight, no clean distinctions between good and evil, just a world ruled by godlike supes, manipulated by a soulless corporation. The question is not could he survive, but it's how long would it take until he becomes the most terrifying threat Vought has ever possibly faced. Spoiler alert, it would not take long. The moment Frank steps into this nightmare, the game changes forever in so many different ways. Now, obviously, if you're thinking about it very stand of fact and just matter of factly, you could easily make the situation of, oh, Frank would just die instantaneously. There's not much that he can do, but we're not going with the method of, oh, he just dies automatically. We want to actually build the story here. So let's actively get into this. We'll just start off by the Punisher entering the world of the Boys, being dropped into this twisted version of reality. Frank really wouldn't be shocked. In fact, I fully believe that he would feel right at home. Corrupt heroes, corporate-backed massacres, and civilians caught in the crossfire. This isn't just a normal day for Frank. This is basically, really would just be his heaven. This would just be a situation where he can actively go all out because everybody is in the wrong. Everybody needs to be taken care of, and this entire world is just full of corrupt villains that need to be just gone. So this would be a perfect day for Frank. But unlike the Boys, Frank doesn't play games. He would not waste time trying to find leverage or build up a case. He'd go straight to the source and burn it down, piece by piece, without flinching in the slightest. But his entry wouldn't be loud. It would be subtle at first, intel gathering, weapons acquisitions, mapping out Vought's infrastructure. He'd hit the streets, talking to underground informants, buying black market tech, and figuring out who the real players are in this kind of world. Once he realizes, the supes like Homelander and Black Noir and what they're truly capable of, he'd shift gears, adapting his military tactics to fight lethal superheroes that really have no mercy and no real care for human life in any main fact of anything. And yeah, Frank may be human, but he survived against men who thought that they were untouchable. He'd treat supes the same way, targets to be eliminated, no matter how bulletproof they may seem. And when he eventually, depending on when he comes into the fray, learns about the soup killing poison invented by Vought and basically the entire situation that we've seen unfold throughout the entirety of season 4, and just kind of the full-on thing that and the way that they developed it, Frank would become obsessed with perfecting it, and not just him doing it himself, because obviously that's not his forte, but he would not only find ways to mass produce it, but he'd experiment with ways for delivery systems, coding bullets, gas grenades, or even creating poison-tipped blades. He'd see it as the ultimate equalizer. While others see Compound V as a weapon or a curse, Frank would see the soup poison as justice in a liquid form, ready to be distributed like the plague like a plague against the unjust. Now, let's talk about when things really get interesting. Frank meeting the Boys, the entire group. This wouldn't just be a working alongside the Boys kind of situation. He would actively become part of them. Not just any member. He would quite possibly become the best friend to Billy Butcher in so many different ways. Because when you think about it, both lost everything to an unchecked power, and honestly to somebody that they thought that they could trust. Because we have Frank on his situation who lost his entire family to somebody that he considered to be a brother, to a situation, if we're just going by the TV show logic, to somebody that he quite literally considered to be his best friend. And Butcher's end, he lost his wife to somebody that the entire world thought that they could trust. Somebody that the entire world thought was the good guy. So They both now understand that they kind of have to deal with this situation, and they would automatically build a bond just off that, especially if he comes in throughout like season one. Both have, a very violent moral code, and neither shies away from getting their hands dirty and very gritty, so they'd practically become brothers in arms. Butcher would respect Frank's efficiency, his unwavering dedication, and his brutal justice and the way that he delivers it. Frank, in turn, would see Butcher as a kindred spirit, someone who doesn't flinch in the face of evil, and they'd bond over war stories, scars, and the countless empty whiskey bottles that they probably would end up sharing if we're being fair. And even their arguments would come out of a place of mutual respect. In fact, Frank might be the one person who could actively occasionally rein Butcher in when his rage starts to compromise the mission. With Grace Mallory, things would probably get a little more complicated. She'd appreciate Frank's skills and military background, but she might find his methods too unpredictable. Frank would operate off of her chain of command, like not on her chain of command specifically. He'd follow his own moral compass. However, over time, she'd come to see that he's not a wild card and he's more like a scalpel, dangerous but precise. And when she sees how Frank refines the weapons that refines and weaponizes the soup poison for surgical strikes later on, even Grace will have to admit that he's indispensable. And as for the rest of the boys, Huey would be intimidated by him at first, but quickly figure out and quickly admire Frank's clarity and purpose. Huey might even learn from him, toughening up in the process and becoming more confident in high-stake missions. Frenchie would be fascinated by Frank's arsenal and combat experience. They trade tips, geek out, over explosives, and likely bond over shared trauma and war zone chaos. The entire endless opportunities are very, very interesting to say the least. Kimiko would connect with Frank silently. No words really needed to be speaking. Just a mutual understanding that this is really what it means to be turned into a weapon, and find out, find that really peace or at least purpose through the violence that they both really share. Would be a very different kind of situation because he would be that moral barometer, consistently questioning Frank's extreme decisions, but he would eventually see that Frank's decisions don't really line up to Butcher's because, yes, Frank will go crazy, but he's not going to do the same things that Butcher is going to be doing in very many situations, but he would never be able to deny Frank's effectiveness. And over time, he might even see it as logical behind, Frank's unflinching resolve. Together, they would become something new, something more lethal, more organized, and a more focused version of the boys than we could possibly ever imagine. Frank would elevate their game to an entirely new level, and in turn, they might end up helping him rediscover a small piece of his loss, love and humanity that kind of got stripped away from him when he lost his family. Now, continuing on, we kind of have to dive into the discussion of, the Poison, Temp V, and Castle's code. Because we know Castle isn't driven by the thrill of power. He is fueled by purpose. So when faced with the choice of whether using the soup-killing poison like Butcher or grab Temp V to level the playing field, Frank's decision would be rooted in one thing: control. Let's start with the poison. Frank would never really use it recklessly. He'd consider it as a scalpel, not like a hammer. He wouldn't be like Butcher, screaming, "kill 'em all," and wiping out anyone with superpower, like anyone with Compound V in their systems. Frank doesn't believe in or specifically like collateral damage. Every drop of the soup poison would have to be accounted for, tested, and only used when the clear target is confirmed. Soups like Homelander, Black Noir, and Stormfront, absolutely on the hit list. But someone like Starlight, or even Maeve, if she showed the remorse that we see her show later on, Frank wouldn't use it unless absolutely pushed. His war has rules. And even if he's on his own, he makes sure to keep those rules no matter what. He has a line that he's not willing to cross that he knows will just make him no better than the people that he's going after. And when it comes to something like Temp V, Frank might be tempted, especially if it meant evening the odds against soups like Homelander, but he wouldn't ultimately see it as dangerous. The temporary powers, the risk to his mind and body, it's too unstable. And he, maybe might use it once, like in a do or die situation, but he wouldn't make a habit of it. Frank doesn't trust power. He trusts preparation, and he trusts what he can do by himself. He'd use the poison that he, will have access to take out the Seven systematically, planting doses in Homelander's personal items, like, whatever, shaving creams, energy drinks, like the breast milk specifically, figuring out very specific ways to use it on some of these heroes to dwindle down the numbers on very specific and select heroes. Rigging A-Train's gear to deliver a toxin upon contact, or infecting his high-calorie food stash or whatever. Using the Deep's unwitting mule, like using the Deep as an unwitting mule to smuggle poison into Vought towers through a tainted sea life or whatever. Setting traps up for Black Noir laced with the one thing that he can't counter, death in a bottle, engineered with precision. This wouldn't just be a mass slaughter. It would be surgical, tactical, and absolutely perfect justice in Frank's eyes. Frank's brand of vengeance always comes with a strategy, a timeline, and a finality that Vought could never prepare for. And if we're being fair, Frank would also eventually have to deal with something else. Because Butcher at some point would consider, or at least maybe honestly ultimately go too far. Butcher going too far is something that's most likely going to happen. He always does. Temp V poisoning his mind, his obsession with vengeance growing darker by the day, Frank would see that happening, and he wouldn't stay silent. If Butcher starts turning on supes like, Starlight or innocent Compound V enhanced kids, or just, truly trying to go the way that he wanted to with just saying screw all of the supes and kill them all, Frank would have to draw a line. Their friendship would ultimately be tested right here. Maybe even specifically broken, because Frank's moral code is his main thing. Like, Frank's core, moral code isn't gonna bend, not even for somebody that he respects. He's not here for genocide. He's here for justice. This could lead to a very violent clash. A potential, Punisher versus Butcher showdown. Not because, they're enemies, but because sometimes justice and vengeance walk very parallel paths that eventually diverge and just completely separate. And Frank would never let someone that he considers family fall into true villainy without an absolute fight that he's going to make sure to try getting them back on that correct path. And there would be just so many things going on in this situation. Specifically, him dealing with Butcher, him dealing with all the boys, him dealing with all of the things that Vaught's hiding, and all of the secrets that are kind of just going around in the boys' universe specifically. And eventually, he'd continue doing what he always does. Frank's always working in the shadows. He'd see through Victoria Newman's political act from day one. Her powers, her secrecy, her manipulation, it would all just scream, something's not right. And Frank, obviously, is not going to confront her directly at first. He'd investigate, dig, plant surveillance across every layer of her life. Just make sure that he knows exactly what's going on. And once he's confirmed her soup identity, he'd act with precision. Not a public assassination, exposure, information warfare, turning the public against her, leaking footage, forcing her to react. Then once she's isolated, that's when he strike. With the poison, one she obviously already knows exists, with explosives, whatever it took. Newman would go down and take her ambitions with her. Obviously, Huey has his connection with her, so there's even a possibility that Huey could possibly convince her to do what she was about to do right before Butcher does what he does in season 4. And if you haven't already watched The Boys by now, what are you doing? Kind of too late. Don't worry about it. But there's a possibility that Newman actually might even repent and, kind of go that same route that she was considering going and truly try changing her acts in one way or another. So there's a couple options there that we could easily see, but most likely Frank's going to get Newman out of there and gone. Now, Frank obviously wouldn't just stop with Newman. He wouldn't just stop with the Seven. Vought International would be the next target. He'd have Frenchie like help him out hacking several layers of their servers, leak documents to the press, assassinate executives, and cripple the supply lines of Compound V. Every piece of Vought's empire would fall upon his crosshairs. He'd unite rogue ex-employees, black market labs, and activists betrayed by supes. He'd organize them to do like a resistance network that even rivals in even like Grace's best and biggest ops. Frank would become more than just a Punisher. He would become a revolutionary force in this kind of boys universe. He would become an absolute symbol. And in most times when we see like people trying to symbolize Frank, we know that usually doesn't end up good. But this is a very separate and different thing that would work perfectly for his own kind of goals and whatever he wants to do. Vought wouldn't just lose supes, they lose their entire grip on reality itself and lose their grip on the people that they protect, because we know people usually end up liking the Punisher because of the fact that he's truly actively just trying to help, and he's just making sure that these villains are gone completely, not leaving any room for debates, not leaving any room for, oh, they should have lived, they should have survived. No, he's making sure that these guys are gone. And Vought would basically just end up with every situation that they could possibly want never happening again. He would make sure that Vought is absolutely demolished and maybe possibly let something new start up in its place and a possibility to, actively do some actual good in the world. But that's the idea. Could Punisher survive in the boys universe? And like, what if he was actually there? He would absolutely first of all, survive, at least in this scenario. But more than that, he'd thrive. He'd find family within the boys group, a war worth fighting in Vought, and a rival worthy of his wrath in Homelander. Together with Butcher and the entire rest of the crew, Frank would redefine what it means to fight dirty. He wouldn't need powers, he would just need a purpose. And Frank always has a purpose. So, if you guys did enjoy this video, please make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell for more videos like this. I hope you guys did, enjoy this actual video, and you guys did seem to like the Jason Todd, Red Hood video that I did last week. So if you guys got any more video ideas that you guys like me to do, please put them down in the comments below, and I will get to them as soon as I can. I have 8 other ideas that I got planned out for you guys to come out in the next couple of weeks. And just every week or whatever. So we will see how all that goes. But please just put it down in the comments. And if I see any ones I really, really like automatically, I'll just bump those ahead of the list and just let those skip the list a little bit. But I will see you guys in more videos like this and just other videos that I do, period. I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.